So we've got amazing scientists and amazing technology. What we want to do is talk to the company about how we can help them. And by speaking their language, I mean we talk about how their company, with working with NIH, can get more products to market. They can sell more products, make more money.
Welcome to the Transfer Files, inside the world of federal innovation. This is your insider's look at how federal laboratories bring groundbreaking technologies to market. I'm your host, Andrea Nelson. In every episode, we'll bring you insights and expertise from throughout the world of tech transfer. Today, I'm excited to introduce our guest, Michael Salgaller from the National Cancer Institute, or NCI, one of the 27 institutes and centers that comprise the National Institutes of Health. Michael's experience includes deep roots in biopharma and life sciences in the government and the private sector. His journey includes roles as a researcher, entrepreneur, business development strategist, lobbyist. He's even written a book titled Biotechnology Entrepreneurship: From Science to Solutions. Michael and I dive into the marketing strategies that he uses at NCI's Technology Assessment and Marketing Unit. He also shares tips and strategies for marketing and communicating that can be applied to any lab, office, or interaction. Please enjoy my conversation with Michael Salgaller. Michael Salgaller, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to jump in and ask you about how do you balance marketing to such different audiences?
That's a very good question. So what we try to do, even before we meet with them, is get background on which particular stakeholder group they are part of. So are they a company? If so, are they a small company? Are they a large company? Are they a service provider? Are they an investor, an entrepreneur, etc.? And get an idea of what their strategic interest might be before we even sit down. And then we listen to them when we do sit down with them and get an idea of their interests. And then that provides us the information we need to make the conversation as productive as possible.
And since you're dealing in the biomedical space, I'm sure there's a lot of sensitive and proprietary information. So how does that impact your approach to marketing those technologies?
We initially market just publicly available information. Could be the abstract on the website, publicly available peer-reviewed publications, etc. And in an initial conversation, we let the company know that in order to assess their interests and needs, we also only need publicly available information. So typically, confidentiality at the initial steps is not necessary.
For such a robust output, what kind of staff and office bandwidth does that require?
I have two full-time people, and I have a series of postdocs or postbacs that help with the effort. We're in one of the 9 satellite technology transfer offices at the NIH, and we are the only one at any of the satellite offices, and also the only group like ours at the central office. So what I'd like to say is we don't claim to speak for all of NIH, but we try to help all of NIH. So, if we meet somebody who their scientific and technical clinical interests are outside of what we're directly responsible for, then I and my team will direct them to the appropriate door so they can continue conversations. And that allows us to do a little bit more outreach because we're not overseeing the follow-up for every single stakeholder we come into contact with.
And while I'm sure tech transfer works differently. The workflows and processes are different within each lab and agency and office. What sort of transferable, boiled down tips and strategies could you offer to tech transfer offices with minimal capacity for marketing?
That's especially a good question because while we have what I feel is a very small team, given the challenge and given the size of NIH, it is still bigger than a lot of tech transfer offices at federal labs who have no one dedicated to analyzing the technologies, building business cases, and creating awareness, education, and outreach. So a tip and strategy would be to try to communicate at the level of your audience, and that's true of any technical sector. You're usually not speaking with somebody who has deep technical knowledge of what you're trying to discuss with them. Again, if you've done some homework, and also if you've asked them about their background, you should gain information about what level of understanding they have with the technology. Don't assume they know something. Don't be condescending, but you also want to explain things, explain abbreviations. You use abbreviations very often. The person you're speaking with may not be familiar with that. And make sure that they understand what you're communicating, because making the other person or persons feel stupid is not a good basis of a relationship. So that's one thing, is to communicate at the level of your audience. Get to know what they're interested in before you pitch anything. You probably have a lot of exciting technologies. Find out if the person that you're talking to is interested in licensing. If their strategic interests don't include licensing, then there's really no reason to bring that up. So do a little bit of your homework. It'll also impress your audience. When you sit down and they start to say, well, let me introduce you to my company, you can indicate, well, we've looked at your website, or we've looked at some of the information that's available on different types of subscription sites. And so they will be impressed that you've done a little homework on them. And they'll also appreciate the fact that you're not going to take up their time going from the very beginning.
And I'm curious, because you're approaching those kinds of conversations knowing that the person on the other side might speak a different language, might not know all the acronyms. Are there adjustments that you find yourself making as the listener then when they respond, where you're adapting, or are there tips for adapting to the kind of language that may be brought to you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so a couple things are to check in with them, close the communication loop. Simply say, did I answer your question? Or did you understand my explanation? Sometimes they don't, but they're too embarrassed, either that they don't know and they feel they should, or they don't want to embarrass you. So that's something very basic that you can ask them. And that gets conversation off to a good start. You can also ask them if they've ever worked with your particular federal agency before. Regardless of what federal agency you're with, you have unique opportunities and challenges. And so someone familiar with working with you, maybe you don't have to explain how royalty rates are determined or how a license application is submitted. So ask them questions and I always try to avoid using the phrase, of course you know that. I even say National Institutes of Health instead of course you know that NIH stands for the National Institutes of Health, because again, you don't want to make your audience feel stupid. And if they don't know something and you said, of course you know that, not a good way to establish a good relationship.
Those are really applicable throughout life, but those are really great tips.
And they're good any sector you're in.
Mhm.
You may not know the level of understanding or the interests of the person that you're sitting down with. Sometimes you have a formal meeting. Sometimes you happen to sit next to somebody at lunch. And so in either case, if you ask them some questions about themselves, then you'll gauge the best way to respond.
And you lead the technology analysis and marketing unit within the National Institutes of Health. And this unit mentors inventors on how to approach industry. And maybe you've already covered them, but are there core tenets that you teach there that we haven't already talked about?
Yes, one thing is to realize that the technology, again, whatever your sector, is necessary but not sufficient. It's just part of the equation that you need to lay out. Part of that comes from my background because I don't have a standard technology transfer background. I started at NIH, but then I left for 20 years. I was an investor with a venture capital fund. I've headed 3 companies. I've been a lobbyist where you have to be able to state your case on either side of an issue. And when I was with a lobby firm, we were engaged by universities and companies and foundations to be connectors, to connect them to places within the federal government that could benefit their interests, which usually involves developing and commercializing a technology. And so that's what my group tries to do with NIH, is to connect different stakeholders to appropriate parts of NIH so that they can get more medical solutions to patients. So some of the things that my group does and learns how to do is to speak beyond the technology, to give the person we're speaking with, for example, the IP status of the technology. That's critical, especially for earlier stage technologies. If you're an early stage company, your IP is the value of your company. Sure, you have computers and chairs and desks and maybe labs, but your value early on is your intellectual property. So we're sure to spend a lot of attention on that. And it's talking about the business and financial advantages, in my case, of working with the National Institutes of Health. So what I would say is, a good guide for people trying to talk to potential collaborators and licensors is use the same basic steps that you would if you were at a small company and trying to get somebody interested in working for you or investing in you. And that is, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? What's your solution? And then how does your solution differ from other people's solutions? What is your differentiators? So those are key things. Anytime we talk about a technology for licensing or collaboration, what's the problem? How do we feel the technology solves that in understandable language? And how does the solution differentiate from other labs that the audience might work with or technologies that the audience might license?
While we're on the topic, would you tell us a little bit more about the technology analysis and marketing unit for listeners who might be interested?
So we do what I've termed inside out and outside in marketing. So the inside out means that one of our internal staff, whether it's a tech transfer manager, unit supervisor, principal investigator, they come to us and they say, I have an invention and I'd like to find a collaborator. I have an invention, I'd like to find somebody to license it. And then we will work with them in building what we call a business case around the technology. So I mentioned, for example, what the IP status is, what the current market for that solution is, the competitive landscape, again, the differentiators, things such as that. And that provides to whoever we talk to a more complete picture of the opportunity. So we do this through technology sheets. So we'll put one-pagers together that look like a small version of a poster that somebody might present at a conference. At first glance, however, it includes, for example, the abstract number or the tab number. It includes the IP position, it includes contact information for the tech transfer manager or officer. It also discusses the experience that the inventor has with licensing and partnerships. So we'll mention that Dr. Smith, for example, is a National Academy of Science member and has over 100 publications. We'll also mention that Dr. Smith has licensed the technology for 3 different companies. And those companies, let's say one has actually progressed the product to market and is currently having sales and helping patients. So we also give the background of the investigator, and that, to the audience, de-risks the opportunity. They know that the investigator has worked with companies before. So he or she understands that the investigator knows that companies and investors and other stakeholders are usually on a much more urgent timeline than respectfully academic research. So if somebody has worked with a lot of companies, that de-risks them as a source of technology and as a collaborator, and puts the audience more at ease. So that's the inside out, helping requests from our own staff. Again, those could be technology sheets. We also hold a webinar series, and we provide webinars to stakeholders around the world. My unit has made, it's got to be over 40 connections with different stakeholders literally around the world, and they're invited to the webinars, and they help us promote the events. And then we also do outside in. So as much as our time and budget allows, we go out and talk to people. You can't, I don't know if you can't, but it's much harder to establish relationships if you sit in your office and make phone calls. Mm-hmm. So we go out and meet people and talk to them. So we go to as many conferences locally, regionally, and nationally as we can. We ask what their interests are. And let's say they have an interest in licensing a cancer drug. We bring that interest back. We have lead calls with all of them. We hold well over 200 lead calls a year, which are just introductions to the opportunities to work with us and to license from us. So we'll hold informational webinars to different groups. We're doing one with Sweden Bio in a couple weeks. We're doing one with Alabama Bio next week. So we do it with different stakeholder groups. We even do it with, for example, professional services firms, law firms, consulting firms, regulatory affairs firms. If they've got a life science clientele, then we tell them that your clients could be our partners. And so we'd like to inform you about how NIH could help your clients. So that outreach, again, is the inside out and the outside in.
Do you have any favorite projects or outcomes from any T2 related projects that you've worked on?
Yes. So we started, along with our colleagues at Frederick National Lab, Frederick County and City, and the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, an annual technology showcase. It features technology, usually in cancer, in the Frederick County, Maryland area. And we met back in 2016 with county and city officials who wanted to better feature cancer research being done at that federal laboratory, in addition to the one in Bethesda, but especially spotlighting that being done in Frederick, Maryland. So just off the cuff, I said, well, we could always put on a conference, and that, in a good way, just ballooned from there. We just finished our 8th event. It remains to this day the only NIH event, not just NCI, National Cancer Institute, but the only National Institutes of Health event where the primary purpose is attracting partners and licensees rather than discussing science. And so we've had numerous agreements and licenses as a result of that. We've won a National FLC award, and we won a National Cancer Institute Directors Award as a result of that. It's something we put on. There's about 10 core people in the organizational team. And we've done it hybrid. We've done it in person. During the COVID years, we did it virtually. And it usually gets over 300 people registered, so it's a pretty good size event. And we're very proud of it. And the fact that, with the exception of a few things like the IT support and the badges, that we don't contract anything out. This is not contracted out to a conference planner who takes hold of everything. It's a lot of rolling up our sleeves and doing the work ourselves.
For those listening who might be interested, that usually takes place around September. Is that right?
Yes, it's the first Wednesday after Labor Day.
What are the biggest challenges that you face in getting life-improving technologies out into the market?
So that's actually an easy question. It's awareness. Companies usually think of the National Institutes of Health as the world's largest academic center, the world's largest funder of academic research, and an entity that publishes a lot of academic papers. And that's how a lot of them think of us. If they know anything about how NIH works with companies or other stakeholders, their knowledge begins and ends with Small Business Investigational Research Grant, or SBIRs. And it's very, very common that if I go to a conference or some networking event and I meet, let's say, 10 companies, all 10 will know about the SBIR program, while 2 out of 3 will not know that there's anything that they can do with NIH other than apply for funding. So that's a challenge. The awareness of the SBIR program, which is truly an amazing program, and it's rightly called America's Seed Fund, the awareness of the SBIR program is much greater than other opportunities with NIH. So that's part of the reason we do so much outreach. Anybody we meet, if they would be interested in hosting a webinar or having a conversation, it's education, awareness, outreach. If we meet companies that are really small, maybe too small to work with us right now, or we speak with an incubator or accelerator that's full of small companies, then we still want to speak with them because we're, so to speak, educating the next generation of collaborators and licensees. And we mentioned that working with NIH, just like working with most federal labs, doesn't have a time clock. It's not a grant. It doesn't have deadlines. It doesn't have page limits. So they can reach out anytime it makes strategic sense to them. And some of the agreements that we've sourced actually happened 2 or 3 years after we met them, because it takes the company that long to grow to a stage where it makes strategic sense for them to take new partners or perhaps add to their pipeline by licensing in a technology from NIH.
From your view, where you sit, would you say that challenge is generally the biggest challenge across the tech transfer ecosystem?
Yes. Once they understand the opportunities, let's just say it's easy to get the meeting. Once you present to a group, let's say in an accelerator or an incubator or some sort of economic development entity, once you speak with them about how you can help them and help their constituents and help their clients, then they're very open to speaking further with you. What we do is we do tech transfer from a buy-side standpoint, which is the people that we're trying to get interested in acquiring our technologies, so it's called buy side, and collaborating with us. And doing tech transfer from the buy side is not rocket science or inventing fire. It's not the way that most, at least university and research institute technology transfer offices does it. They do it from their standpoint. They just offer things. So we've got amazing scientists and amazing technology. What we want to do is talk to the company about how we can help them. And by speaking their language, I mean, we talk about how their company, with working with NIH, can get more products to market. They can sell more products, make more money. NIH's mission and goals includes improving global health, absolutely. But one of the goals of NIH is also to facilitate economic development. It's to take the appropriation we get from Congress and the US taxpayer and give them a return on investment. And that means getting more products to market, help companies grow, hire more people, lease more space. So when you talk to them about their interests, and their interests are growing their region and growing their company, when you talk their language and you talk about how you can help them achieve their goals, then it's a pretty, straightforward conversation.
You've sat in a lot of different seats around this table, and you've been teaching also biotechnology entrepreneurship for nearly 20 years, literally wrote the textbook on this topic, available on Amazon, and we will link that on our episode page. But in those 20 years, what has changed in your course material and in the students?
So the students is more straightforward. I have students from different federal agencies. Some of them are just interested in professional development. Others are interested in starting companies and getting some basic knowledge. And I'm very proud to say that over the years, I've had at least 10 former students start companies that still exist. It's not hard to start a company. To have it still exist after 2 or 3 years is a challenge. So that has stayed the same. The other parts of the course change every year because science is trendy, like fashion. It isn't necessarily thought that way, but things come in and out of favor. And so we talk about, to the students also each year, about what the current trends are. Mm-hmm. Where are investors putting their money? Where are the most areas of, say, publication coming about? The major stakeholder groups, where they see the field going in a couple of years. And so we try to give the students not just a current idea of, lay of the land, but because the lay of the land will change once they complete the course, how to assess that for themselves and what tools they can do. Because a lot of them are interested, okay, how can I raise financial support for my ideas? You need to know where that money is, who's investing and who's not investing. And then once you find that out, you need to find out where they're investing and adapt your actions accordingly. So as far as what changes all the time is the risks of technology, current hot technology, where people are putting money and interest, and that changes literally every quarter. That's why we also take a look at different financial sites to see, for example, investment in certain sectors and things like that.
So you're teaching them how to fish and also how to find a good fishing spot when the weather changes.
That's an excellent way to put it. And then we give them some practical advice. The book is, I call it like a, it's not a textbook. It's somewhere between a textbook and a beach read, though. It's something you could sit down and get through in an afternoon. And we give them some practical tips that they can use to try to either just learn more about how to start a company, or for a lot of them, they just want to understand how to get other people interested in what they're doing. And so that's true even if you are happy with academic research And you're happy if your career has you giving posters for the next 20 years. Somebody comes by your poster. How do you get them interested in what you're doing? How do you excite them? How do you connect with them? And so we talk to them about that as well.
Are there any other topics that you would like to discuss, things that we've missed?
I do want to touch on briefly the fact that most of your audience doesn't have the resources that we do. While I would love it if they increase my team, again, I realize that a lot of your audience are in a technology transfer office or center, whatever, and everybody in that office is dedicated to negotiating work, transactional work, filing patents, the traditional tech transfer work. So how can I get somebody interested in licensing a technology on my docket, given I don't have a team to help me with that? So a couple things would be that when you attend a conference, everybody attends at least one conference, usually a year. There's budget for that. When you go to that, instead of spending all of your time or most of your time hanging out with other people you know in tech transfer, look for the attendees that are from potential collaborators and licensees. Seek out their presentations, seek out their panels, seek out their posters, and just interact with them and see if you can get them interested in what you're doing. The other thing would be to learn a little bit about your technology area and how it could be attractive to the business side. So go beyond the technology and just have some initial information, even if it's, for example, what the intellectual property position is. Do you have any, is it an issued patent? If not, are there claims that have been allowed? That, especially since most of our technologies are thought of as early stage, that really de-risks it in the eyes of the person or persons that were trying to get interested in it. So you can do some initial things, even though you don't have a staff and you're very limited time, to try to get people interested. The other thing I do is if you have a docket and you have several companies that are working with you, let's say on collaborations, and then you get a new invention and the investigator wants to get somebody to work with, then start with your docket. That's low-hanging fruit. Somebody who's already working with you and understands and enjoys working with you, and in addition, that understands the opportunities and challenges of your particular agency, to me, that's low-hanging fruit. The analogy that I give is if somebody comes in and you own a furniture store, and they say, I bought a couch from you. I love that couch. Well, great. How about a chair? How about a lamp? How about a rug? So to me, that's low-hanging fruit. So look within your docket for potential collaborators and licensees, even if you're working only with, let's say, large companies. If you haven't had a new collaboration, let's say you've got ongoing collaborations, but you haven't signed anything new with them in a couple of years, chances are very strong that company has some new initiatives. Maybe they would be interested in discussing licensing or collaborating with some of their new initiatives. So reach out to them, say, what else could we be doing together? And that's a good place to start.
Michael Salgaller, thank you again so much for your advice, your insights, and your time.
Well, I really, really appreciate the opportunity, Andrea. It's part of our outreach, education, awareness. So I really appreciate and have enjoyed your podcast.
For more information on Michael, NCI's Technology Assessment and Marketing Unit, or anything else we talked about, check in the resources on this episode page at federallabs.org. Thanks to our producer and digital marketing manager, Carly Donow, graphics manager, Danny Batchelor, web content and systems manager, Jess Klein, and the FLC staff and community for your support. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back in 2 weeks on Transfer Files Tuesday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Transfer Files, your insider's look at federal tech transfer. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay connected for more episodes exploring how hundreds of government laboratories and countless industry partners are driving innovations that shape our lives.